This time at Adoption Uncover, I want to do something a little different and tell you about how I am connected to adoption and foster care. Over the course of this project, I really enjoyed focusing on other people who have told me their stories and their ideas about how to make adoption and foster care better for everyone involved. And I'm really grateful that you've tuned in to learn alongside me. My curiosity has been a driving factor in making sure the attention is away from me. And there are a lot of issues within foster care and adoption that I'm not personally experienced with. And I've benefited from being let into other people's experience. It's also taken me a while to really look at which pieces of my foster care and adoption journey are mine to tell and which belong to other people, belong to my adopted kids or other people in my immediate family, or even people outside of my immediate family. And I've done a lot of introspection, a lot of journaling and thinking about how I can be fair and do right by all the people that are involved in my story. And I feel like I've really come to the place where I understand that. And I think it's important that you know me and to be able to trust me as I continue to bring you episodes and also branch out into offering other services. I think you need to know what my journey's been like and how I've interacted with adoption and foster care. And you need to know that I've seen the current system and hoped for better. You need to know that I've made mistakes and learned from them. And I hope you give me the benefit of the doubt as a fellow human being and parent. So now, without further ado, here is a quick trip down memory lane for me. I invite you into my story, this time on Adoption Uncovered. As I was growing up, the idea of adoption was something I was familiar with in this theoretical sense. I didn't know anyone who was adopted. I didn't know any foster parents or anyone that I knew for sure was in foster care. I had always had this intense desire to help people. And this is something I have viewed in a very practical sense. When I was in school, I would actively choose the children who had a hard time making friends to reach out to and make friends with. I'm an extrovert, so I found people who had difficulty communicating and connecting with others. And um, it became sort of an inspiring challenge for me to find a way to communicate with them and befriend them. When I was a camp counselor in high school, this was a camp I attended in middle school and it was associated with our church, and they desperately needed counselors. So even though I was on the younger side for what they prefer, they let me come. And when I got there, I learned sort of the lay of the land. Um, and other counselors explained to me what they thought of the campers. And there was one girl in particular that none of them knew what to do with. They couldn't get her to cooperate or to sit still, and they were all sort of at their wits' end with her. So it wasn't long before I encountered her and I saw exactly what they meant. She wasn't in my cabin, but I ran into her around camp and I started interacting with her and I talked to her and I got to know her. And so I got to know this girl and I tried to understand who she was and what was going on and how I could encourage her to understand that she was seen, but I also had expectations that she could do this. She could do the thing that we were asking her to do. Um, so the next time we were in chapel, I invited her to sit by me and she did. And she sat still. She listened. And from then on, for the rest of the week, she did everything with the other girls in my cabin and I. And we became like a fairly inseparable group. And everyone saw the transformation. And I learned the first lesson of many that encouraged me not to be intimidated of children with challenges. So that was one experience that made adoption or and foster care seemed like something I wanted to incorporate in my life. I never looked at either one of those and thought, I hope I can seamlessly find a child to replace a possible biological child. Even before I graduated high school, I was open to having children in my home that had challenges. Um, since I was only in high school and looking at all this theoretically, there was a lot that I didn't know about the people involved in the system and what type of involvement in the system provided the most help to the children in it. It didn't take long for me to realize that there were some ways of helping that do more benefit to those helping than those receiving the help. I checked a number of volunteer activities off my list as ones that I didn't feel were truly a place where volunteering was contributing. I spent some time working full time at a homeless shelter, and I was in charge of donations for the women's and children's division. And I saw things that were donated that people thought we could use, but in reality were actually an insult. Like, I remember a large donation of these really dated, out of style old coats, and many of them were actually rusted onto their hangers. And some of them were just falling apart. And people seemed to think that homeless people were so desperate they would be willing to take these old stained coats, and that just wasn't true. The homeless women I worked with had a sense of style too. They had pride. They were just in a tough spot. And many of them were victims of a cycle that was incredibly hard to break. So that time definitely informed my view of homelessness in America in many ways, and my view of women and children in poverty. Um, there was a time when I was working there, um, and I was fairly ignorant of foster care and adoption still. Um, but I remember the police were called to our main lobby of the homeless shelter, and the staff we had a little warning that they were coming and why. But apparently, one of our residents had been working with social services for a while, and social services had determined that her children needed to be taken into foster care. But they didn't expect that to go smoothly based on their history with her. So they requested the police to come in the shelter and facilitate taking her children. Um, and so I was off to the side when this happened, but I was in the lobby. But I will never forget the way she screamed and cried as four or five officers told her they were there to take her children into foster care. And I don't remember the children making any noise, but their mom was restrained from going after them. And I really don't fully know what to think because I didn't know her well or I didn't know the case. Um, my background and what I was taught growing up was definitely a philosophy that said if people would just go to work and behave appropriately in society, they would succeed and access the middle class life I had. I was just starting to discover that things weren't that simple. So, adoption to me seemed like an effective way to help a child who needed it. And that, if that meant raising them was harder and I had to do more work to discover how to connect with them and raise them, I wanted to do that. Having children and adoption was something I wanted to incorporate into my life before I even met my husband. And when I finally did meet him, that was his desire too. Um, and coming from the environment of the church where woman's role was in the home, it seemed natural for both of us that I would stay home and raise the children we might have. So after getting married, we gave birth to our first son right away. And when he was a little over a year, we tried again and had our daughter. And that was the point we decided to start in on our first adoption. We decided that our first adoption was going to be international. So after I completed our first wave of paperwork, I immediately took advantage of the password protected list of children who were waiting for families. So when I looked at this list, there was one boy in particular that caught my eye. And when we got to the point where our home had been visited multiple times and I had completed multiple trips to the notary and our bank. We finally were able to request information on this boy, and our social worker um, overnighted this exploding envelope of documents that was dropped off on our front porch. Um, some of them were in a language I couldn't read, but most were translated. And so on, as articles online suggested at the time, we dropped off a number of the documents to our pediatrician to see what he thought of the life ahead would be like for this boy from a medical perspective. He had a mild form of cerebral palsy. And when our pediatrician got back to us with the information they had, we felt like, yes, we were going to go ahead and move forward with this. And from the time we initially signed the first document in this adoption to when um, I went over and met him and brought him home to stay with us, it took about a year. So a lot of adoptive and foster parents find that even though they've read books and done training, when they finally welcome a child into their home, they immediately find themselves in a situation that just doesn't look like what they expected. And the same was true for us. The initial transition to including this boy into our lives was tricky. I was raised with this simple parenting advice that said, if your child did not do what you told them to do, that was a form of rebellion, and you needed to show that child that they would not win. And I'm sure a number of you are already groaning hearing me say that. Um, Especially those who have experience with adopted or foster children or children with trauma. It is just not that simple, right? If your child has stress or trauma and you just put them in a timeout, you're absolutely missing an opportunity and potentially setting both of you up for failure. It took some time, but we realized within a month or so that we were wrong to oversimplify parenting to that formula, and we changed our approach and saw things go more smoothly after that. And the end. I mean, I hope you think that's ridiculous too, because most parents understand that raising children often means that the goalposts are constantly changing. Um, And those who have raised adopted or foster children know even better that you can enjoy the wins, but the wins don't mean victory. They are a good moment or a good day that can allow you to take a breath before you dive back into the thick of things. Um, we moved forward. We were not done adopting. We moved, and I started volunteering with foster care as a guardian ad litem. I had learned this existed at a county fair we went to at our previous house. And I knew this was a type of volunteering that I definitely wanted to try. So when we moved, we started another international adoption process, and I got my training as a GAL. And for those of you who don't know what this is, this position um, exists in most places all over the country where foster care happens. Sometimes they're called CASA. And these volunteers are appointed by the court and are given the right to interview everyone involved in a foster care case. We can talk to aunts and uncles and first moms and dads if we can track them down. We talk to social workers and we review the case file so we can get a glimpse of the entire history of what has happened with this family and how they've been involved with social services. We're required by the court to visit children involved in a case once a month. So we get to hear from them and from their foster parents, like how they're doing, how are the visits going, what do the foster parents wish they could get for these children, and how they would like the future to look for them. The GALs put together a report which they submit to the judge in the case that gives a recommendation for what they think is in the best interest of the children. And then we know children often can't even comprehend their own situation and definitely don't have a voice. So that is what this position is attempting to remedy. So we were progressing through this adoption process, and I was volunteering with foster care at the same time. And then the economy collapsed in 2008, and our family was affected by that. I think many people look at adoptive parents as if they're, I don't know, rich people who buy children. That would not have described us. We were people who were getting by, but adopting was not easy to afford. We were choosing to do our best, but when we were faced with this nationwide financial situation, we really struggled to decide if we should continue or not. And I'm still not even sure what the right decision was. I think many of us have been in those times in our lives. And I know we have, especially along our adoption foster care journey, where you have to make a decision even though you don't have all the information you need. And we decided to end our international adoption and become foster parents. And now, before foster parents become concerned at our motivation, I can assure you, we did not go into foster care thinking we would necessarily adopt. We knew that we would be supporting a first family to get on their feet and regain custody if they could. Um, I looked forward to the opportunity to work with another family and see what I could do to support them. That was fairly ignorant on my part, because once we got licensed and once we got our first placement, I sort of got a crash course in all the problems with foster care. I mean, I didn't get a chance to work with first family in a way that I felt was supportive. So it was during this time when we were foster parents that I got pregnant again, and we had another son. Um, and after our case ended at this time, we chose to take a break from foster parenting and go back to pursuing international adoption. Um, but it was while we were involved in this process that a wonderful social worker that we had who had been doing our international home studies for us suggested that she do a home study for us specifically so we could offer this home study to social workers of foster kids who were up for adoption through Adopt US Kids. People have a lot of opinions about the website Adopt US Kids because it is a nonprofit that posts bios of children from foster care who are having a tough time being adopted. So their first family is not available, there's not relatives, their foster parents are not choosing to adopt them, and they've just kind of run out of obvious options in their location where they are. People are conflicted because people don't like the idea of posting children and their pictures on a list for the public to see. And it's not ideal. And children who are on this list are not in an ideal circumstance. It's not good that in this country there are so many kids in foster care that are in a position where they need a stable placement and they can't find one. And it's bad that the way we have to connect these kids with possible families that could give them stability is to post their bio online. But that's where things are right now. And I hope we find a better way. And I hope we find more families that will take these children before they have to be put on a list. But that's how things work right now. But this is not like a dating service where you're communicating with the child and you figure out if it works for you. You have to go through many, many checks. You have to be a certified foster parent. And you have to be approved by the social worker. And you have to go through many hoops to get from where you are with your approved home study to connecting with a child. But as it turns out, as we were going through a process, an international adoption process, our home study social worker was willing to send our home study to social workers who asked for it on Adopt US Kids. So every day I would look and see if there were children on this listing that we could potentially imagining bringing into our home, children or sibling groups. And the vast majority of the time, I didn't hear back. Sometimes a social worker would say, "Hey, send me your home study," and I would gladly do that. And then finally, one day, there was a social worker who asked for our home study, and I started communicating with them. And we started talking back and forth, and they were just getting to know us and our situation a little better. And they said that we were the top candidate that they were looking for a girl who in our area that needed a permanent placement. And we weren't licensed foster parents at that time, so we had to go through a year's worth of preparation to try to get in position to meet this girl and meet her foster parent. So we did that. We did the that work, and we found in the course of that many more things that were problematic in the system. But we went forward, and we met her, and she met our other kids. The whole year we were working, we were told that she was definitely going to be, we were definitely going to be able to adopt her. And then after that year, and after she had met our kids, we were called into the office, and we're told that she would not be coming to live with us because her foster parent had decided to adopt her, which was really hard to hear after all that time. And I really was sad. I mean, and I knew at the time, look, I have four kids. What right do I have to be sad about this not working out? But we were working with a rural county, and this county kind of saw they had gotten to know us over the past year, and they had seen some of the struggles we had going through the system, and what kind of people we were. And they, after a while after this happened, they came to us again and said, look, we have a girl that needs another placement, and her case might be going toward adoption. Would you be open to fostering and maybe adopting her? And we thought about it. We did some research to kind of see what the situation was like, and we decided to take that placement, and that is how we got to be five kids. So I was invested full time in raising those kids, and even homeschooling them for a while. And then over time, we decided that I needed to go to work, and then the kids went to school, and now they're growing up as they do. And all of these things that I've seen and learned about adoption and foster care, and the wider issues and the history of adoption care, all of this has been on my mind for many years. And I thought about how having the experience I have had interacting with all of the different people connected to foster care and adoption has given me ideas about some of the problems and how I could imagine doing them better. And I wondered what other people with other experiences thought about how to make these systems better. And I really wanted to tell other people's stories. But more than that, I wanted to understand a way that their story could lead us to have creative conversations about how to do things better for everyone involved. So I started podcasting and writing a few years ago, and I have been amazed by how many people have just generously allowed me to listen to their thoughts and pick their brains. And I've talked to adoptees and adoptive parents, but also birth parents and social workers and researchers and journalists. I've reframed my own thinking as I have talked to each one of them. And going forward, I want to do other things. I've put together my first course about how, as adoptive parents, we can and we should talk to our children about adoption. My goal with that is to encourage adoptive parents to think about what might be in their own way from talking to their kids about adoption, and what types of things at different age levels you might try to make conversations about adoption more a part of your everyday life. This is one of those topics where I feel like parents and adoptees can just be so divided because so often adoptive parents, especially in previous generations, just were not encouraged to face the hard parts of adoption and to face the other family, the first family that's in the mix. But adoptees have spoken up and they've told us that no, we need to talk about these things. We need to acknowledge them. We need to be by their side as they're trying to discover who they are, where they're from, what does adoption mean to them. So I'm hoping that through this course, it can be a jumping off point to figure out how are you as an adoptive parent feeling and thinking about communicating about adoption? Is it hard? Do you have things that you have to deal with? And what are ways that you can interact with your kid about adoption? I'm someone who's experienced it, researched it, listened to others who are experts, and I totally want to relay all that factual information that I've learned so that you can do your own research and you can find your own path, what works for you. But you need to find what works for you. And I hope to put out more courses in the future and do all I can to support all of us having a more accurate understanding of adoption and foster care, not only within the community, but everyone, so that we can be more effective in the way we support women and children in this country of all kinds. I hope you can check out my website and look into more of the services I offer and see if any of them might be useful to you, especially if you've been touched by foster care and adoption. I am always open to hearing from people who would like to tell me their foster care or adoption story or receive support. Head over to adoptionuncovered.com to explore. I'd love to hear from you, and thank you.